The summer of 1967 burns with unprecedented heat, not just meteorologically, but culturally, politically, spiritually. San Francisco blooms with flowers and acid dreams. Detroit erupts in flames of rage and frustration. Young men board planes for Southeast Asia, returning in boxes or not at all. The Beatles have released a kaleidoscopic masterpiece that suggests rock music can be high art. Everything feels poised on the edge of transformation or collapse, perhaps both simultaneously. And in Los Angeles, 4 musicians face an impossible challenge. How do you follow up an album that redefined what rock music could be? The Doors' self-titled debut, released in January, has exceeded all expectations. It has climbed to number 2 on the charts. The edited version of their breakthrough single has spent 3 weeks at number 1. Their 11-minute epic has established them as serious artists willing to take risks. Jim Morrison's face stares from magazine covers, his beauty and danger-making, him the perfect symbol for a generation questioning everything their parents believed. The band has toured relentlessly, played the Ed Sullivan Show, become one of the most talked-about acts in America. Success, when it arrives this quickly and completely, creates its own set of problems. Elektra Records, the label that took a chance on the Doors when other companies dismissed them as too weird, too dark, too uncommercial, now wants another album. Quickly. The music industry in 1967 operates on brutal timelines. Bands are expected to release 2, sometimes 3 albums per year to maintain momentum, to capitalize on popularity before tastes shift and audiences move on to the next sensation. The Doors have been on the road almost constantly since their debut's release. They are exhausted, frayed, running on fumes and pharmaceuticals. But the label is insistent, and the band understands that their window of cultural relevance might close as suddenly as it opened. They return to Sunset Sound in April 1967, the same modest studio where they recorded their debut. Producer Paul Rothchild, who captured the magic of their first sessions, is back behind the board. But something is different now. The innocence of those early recordings, the hunger of unknown musicians desperate to prove themselves, has been replaced by the weight of expectations. Everyone is watching. Critics are waiting to declare them one-hit wonders. Fans demand another masterpiece. The pressure is, suffocating. Morrison arrives at the sessions in a state that concerns his bandmates. He has been drinking more heavily, using his fame as license for excess. His weight has begun to fluctuate. His behavior grows increasingly erratic. Some days he is brilliant, focused, channeling his poetic vision into lyrics that rival anything he wrote for the debut. Other days, he is absent, disengaged, or so intoxicated he can barely stand before the microphone. Ray Manzarek, Robbie Krieger, and John Densmore try to compensate, to keep the project moving forward even when their lead singer seems determined to sabotage it. The songs they bring into the studio reflect the strangeness of the moment. There is nothing safe here, nothing designed to replicate the debut's commercial success. Instead, the material pushes into darker, weirder territory. Krieger has written a song about alienation and paranoia that uses a circus waltz rhythm, making discomfort danceable. Manzarek contributes a track about urban anxiety, the feeling of being trapped in a city that both attracts and threatens. Morrison's lyrics have grown more surreal, more fragmented, reflecting either artistic growth or psychological unraveling, possibly both. The album's title track emerges from a jam session, the band locking into a groove that feels simultaneously mechanical and organic, like a machine developing consciousness. Morrison's lyrics paint a picture of a world where the familiar has become alien, where technology and humanity merge in unsettling ways. The words flow from him in bursts of inspiration between periods of paralysis. When he sings the verses, his voice carries an urgency that suggests he is describing not some imagined future, but the present moment. the strange days that 1967 has already become. Recording proceeds in fits and starts. Some sessions are productive, the band finding the chemistry that made their debut so powerful. They experiment with new sounds, using a Moog synthesizer on one track, incorporating orchestral elements on another. Rothchild encourages their ambition, understanding that artistic growth requires taking risks, but other sessions collapse into chaos. Morrison fails to show up or arrives so intoxicated he cannot perform. Arguments erupt about arrangements, about lyrics, about the fundamental direction of the album. The unity that characterized the debut begins to fracture. Yet somehow, through the dysfunction and tension, remarkable music emerges. A song about a moonlight drive captures the romance and menace of Los Angeles nights, Krieger's guitar work suggesting both beauty and danger. Another track, built on a Bo Diddley beat, transforms classic rock rhythm into something sinister and hypnotic. Morrison's vocals shift from seductive whisper to anguished howl, his range and intensity reminding everyone why, despite his growing unreliability, he remains irreplaceable. The phone lines at the radio station had been ringing off the hook since the debut's single became a phenomenon. Now, months later, programmers wonder whether the Doors can deliver again, whether the debut was a fluke or the beginning of something sustained and significant. Before we continue deeper into this story, be part of our channel. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any incredible story we've prepared for you. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love to see how far our stories travel. The sessions stretch through spring and, into early summer. The band works whenever Morrison is functional, stealing hours and days to complete the album. They record a song that Morrison claims came to him in a dream, its lyrics cryptic and unsettling, its arrangement sparse and haunting. They revisit a composition from their early days at the Whiskey A Go-Go, refining it into a statement about desire and desperation. Each track adds to a portrait of a world where nothing is as it seems, where surfaces hide deeper and darker truths. Rothchild proves invaluable during this difficult period. He knows when to push the band and when to give them space. He understands Morrison's process, recognizes that the chaos and dysfunction are not separate from the art, but integral to it. He captures performances that other producers might have discarded as too raw, too imperfect. He builds the album not as a collection of potential singles, but as a unified statement, an artistic vision that demands to be experienced as a whole. The album's cover concept reflects its themes. The band commissions a striking image, a street scene populated by performers and freaks, a circus of the surreal. Morrison and his bandmates stand amid this carnival of strangeness, neither fully part of it nor entirely separate from it. The image perfectly captures the album's essence, a world familiar enough to be recognizable but distorted enough to be deeply unsettling. This is not the psychedelic optimism of San Francisco. This is something darker, a vision of transformation that includes decay and destruction. By the time summer arrives in full force, the album is complete. It has taken longer than the label wanted, cost more than budgeted, nearly destroyed the band's chemistry. But it exists against considerable odds. The question now is whether anyone will want to hear it. The debut succeeded partly because it was fresh and unexpected. This new album is neither. It arrives weighted with expectations, comparisons, the burden of following, a phenomenon. Elektra schedules a September release, hoping to capitalize on the continued success of the debut, while also establishing the Doors as more than one-album wonders. The label's marketing department faces a challenge. How do you sell an album that is deliberately strange, that offers no obvious hit single, that seems designed to confound rather than comfort? They focus on the band's mystique, on Morrison's growing reputation as rock's most dangerous and unpredictable frontman. They sell the album as an experience, a journey into territory where few rock bands dare venture. The first single released ahead of the album is the track about alienation and paranoia, the one with the circus waltz rhythm. Radio programmers are uncertain. It is catchy but also deeply weird, Morrison's vocals shifting between crooning and snarling. Some stations play it, others reject it as too strange for their audiences. It climbs the charts but nowhere near as high as the debut's breakthrough hit. This concerns the label, but does not surprise the band. They knew they were making something uncommercial, something that would divide rather than unite. Critics who receive advance copies of the album are similarly divided. Some praise the Doors for refusing to repeat themselves, for pushing into new sonic territory, for treating their second album as an opportunity for growth rather than safe replication. They hear sophistication in the arrangements, depth in Morrison's increasingly surreal lyrics, courage in the band's willingness to risk alienating the audience they have only just found. These critics position the album as proof that rock can be serious art, that commercial success and artistic integrity need not be mutually exclusive. Other reviewers are less kind. They find the album pretentious, deliberately obscure, lacking the immediate impact of the debut. They suggest the Doors are trying too hard to be weird, that Morrison's lyrics have crossed from poetic to incomprehensible. They wonder whether success has gone to the band's heads, whether they have lost touch with what made them special in the first place. Some explicitly call the album a sophomore slump, a disappointment after the promise of the debut. The band members themselves have conflicting feelings about what they have created. Manzarek believes it is their finest work, more musically sophisticated than the debut, proof that they are evolving as artists. Krieger takes pride in his compositional contributions, in the guitar work that pushes beyond conventional rock approaches. Densmore appreciates the rhythmic complexity, the way the album incorporates jazz and world music influences into a rock framework. But Morrison, characteristically, is ambivalent. Some days he defends the album passionately. Other days he dismisses it, claims not to remember recording parts of it, suggests it is merely product churned out to satisfy contractual obligations. When the album is released, in late September 1967, initial sales are respectable but not spectacular. It enters the charts in the top 20, eventually climbing to number 3, a strong performance by any measure except comparison to the debut's sustained success. The disconnect between critical reception and commercial performance becomes a subject of music industry discussion. Has the Doors' moment already passed? Have they alienated their audience by refusing to give them more of what they wanted? But something interesting happens as autumn progresses. The album develops a reputation among a certain segment of listeners, those who appreciate its strangeness, who hear in its dark vision a more honest representation of 1967's contradictions than the flower power anthems dominating San Francisco. College students embrace it. Underground radio stations play it in its entirety during late-night shows. Musicians listen carefully, recognizing the sophistication beneath the surface weirdness. The album may not produce hit singles, but it establishes the Doors as artists rather than merely pop stars. Live performances of the new material prove challenging. Some songs translate powerfully to the stage, gaining intensity in concert settings. Others lose something in translation, their studio complexity difficult to reproduce with just 4 musicians. Morrison's increasing unreliability makes every show a gamble. Some nights he delivers passionate, committed performances that justify the band's reputation. Other nights he is drunk, distracted, or actively hostile to the audience. The tension between the band's artistic ambitions and Morrison's self-destructive tendencies becomes impossible to ignore. The album's influence begins to manifest in unexpected ways. Other bands, watching the Doors refuse to replicate their debut's sound, take courage to pursue their own experimental impulses. The notion that a successful band's second album should be a commercial consolidation rather than an artistic exploration starts to shift. The Doors have demonstrated that challenging your audience can be both artistically valid and commercially viable, even if the results are not as spectacular as simply giving people what they expect. The title track, in particular, gains significance as 1967's strangeness deepens. The summer of love has revealed its dark underbelly. The political situation grows more dire. The generation gap widens into a chasm. Morrison's vision of strange days no longer seems like artistic exaggeration, but like documentary observation. The album captures the moment when optimism curdles into paranoia, when the revolution's promise meets the reality of entrenched power and human weakness. The song about urban anxiety becomes an anthem for those feeling trapped in cities that promise freedom but deliver isolation. Its driving rhythm and Morrison's intense vocals capture the feeling of being pursued by forces you cannot see but definitely sense. Young people living in cramped apartments, working dead-end jobs while dreaming of escape, hear their experience reflected in the music. The song speaks to the disconnect between the counterculture's utopian rhetoric and the grinding reality of trying to survive while rejecting conventional paths to success. As winter approaches and 1967 draws to its tumultuous close, the album's reputation continues to evolve. It is no longer simply the Doors' difficult second album, but an important artistic statement, a document of a specific cultural moment when optimism and despair existed in uncomfortable proximity. Music historians will later recognize it as a crucial bridge between the garage rock of the mid-60s and the progressive complexity of the early 70s, proof that popular music could be both accessible and challenging. The album's commercial performance ultimately satisfies the label, though it does not match the debut's sustained success. More importantly, it establishes the Doors as artists with a staying power, musicians committed to growth and experimentation rather than formula and replication. This reputation will serve them well as the music industry becomes increasingly interested in album-oriented rock, in artists who can sustain careers across multiple releases rather than flaming out after one successful album. Morrison's relationship with the material remains complex. In interviews throughout late 1967 and early 1968, he offers contradictory assessments. Sometimes he praises the album as their most honest work, free from the constraints of trying to prove themselves. Other times he dismisses it as rushed and unsatisfying, compromised by his own dysfunction during the recording process. This ambivalence reflects Morrison's broader struggle with his role as a rock star, his desire to be taken seriously as an artist, conflicting with his impulse to destroy everything he creates. The other band members grow increasingly frustrated with Morrison's unreliability and his tendency to receive both credit and blame for work that is genuinely collaborative. The album showcases Manzarek's keyboard innovations, Krieger's compositional growth, Densmore's rhythmic sophistication, yet public discourse focuses almost exclusively on Morrison. This imbalance will contribute to tensions that eventually tear the band apart, though that end is still years away as 1967 concludes. The album's influence on the Doors' peers is immediate and significant. Bands that were planning to follow up successful debuts with safe commercial consolidations reconsider. The notion that artistic risk is not just valid, but potentially beneficial gains traction. While many acts will ignore this lesson and pursue formulaic success, those with genuine artistic ambitions take note. The Doors have proven that you can challenge your audience and survive, perhaps even thrive. The recording sessions for the album, despite their difficulty, produce techniques and approaches that Rothchild and the band will use on future projects. They have learned how to work with Morrison's limitations, how to capture inspiration when it strikes, rather than forcing creativity on schedule. They have expanded their sonic palette, incorporating elements that will become more prominent in later albums. The struggles of creating this difficult second album teach lessons that make subsequent recordings smoother, though never easy. Critics who initially dismissed the album begin to reassess as its influence becomes clear. By early 1968, several publications that panned the release upon its arrival publish reconsiderations, acknowledging that perhaps they missed something on first listen, that the album rewards sustained attention in ways that more immediately accessible records do not. This critical rehabilitation is gratifying for the band, but also slightly frustrating. They made the album they wanted to make, and external validation, while welcome, feels somewhat beside the point. The album's standing continues to rise as the decade progresses and ends. As the 60s optimism gives way to the 70s cynicism, the album's dark vision seems prescient rather than pessimistic. Songs that initially seemed too strange, too challenging, begin to sound like honest assessments of cultural transformation's costs and consequences. The album ages better than many of its more immediately successful contemporaries, its willingness to embrace discomfort and complexity proving more durable than dated utopian anthems. The Doors will release more albums, some more commercially successful, others more experimental. They will continue to evolve, to push boundaries, to frustrate and fascinate in equal measure. But this second album represents a crucial moment. The point where they could have played it safe and chose not to, where they prioritized artistic integrity over commercial calculation. That choice, whatever its immediate costs, establishes them as artists rather than mere entertainers, as musicians with vision and courage rather than opportunists chasing trends. Looking back across decades, the album stands as a testament to the creative possibilities that emerge when artists refuse to repeat themselves, when they treat success as an opportunity for exploration rather than a template to replicate. It captures a specific moment, late 1967, when the counterculture's promises were colliding with harsh realities, when optimism and despair existed in uncomfortable proximity. The album's title, which initially seemed merely evocative, proves accurate. These were strange days indeed, and the Doors created the perfect soundtrack for their strangeness. The musicians who gathered at Sunset Sound in spring 1967, exhausted and pressured, uncertain and ambitious, created something that exceeded their intentions. They made an album that confounded expectations, that refused to give audiences what they claimed to want, that prioritized artistic vision over commercial strategy. In doing so, they expanded rock music's possibilities, proved that challenging your audience could be both artistically valid and commercially viable, and created a document that remains relevant precisely because it refused to be timely. The album nobody expected became the album many needed, even if they did not realize it immediately. Its strange days captured the mood of a nation in transformation, a generation questioning everything, a culture tearing itself apart to, perhaps, rebuild into something better. The Doors, flawed and struggling, created music equal to the moment's complexity. They did not provide easy answers or comfortable reassurance. They offered instead an honest reflection of the times. Dark, strange, beautiful, terrifying, and utterly alive. As the 60s rushed toward their tumultuous conclusion, as Morrison's own trajectory grew increasingly self-destructive, as the band navigated success and dysfunction in equal measure, this album stood as proof of what they could achieve when ambition overcame obstacles, when artistic vision triumphed over commercial pressure, when four musicians created something greater than themselves. The strange days of 1967 produced a strange and remarkable album, one that continues to reward listeners willing to enter its unsettling landscape, to embrace its refusal of easy comfort, to recognize that sometimes the most honest art is also the most challenging. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any incredible story we've prepared for you. See you in the next story.